Welcome to One Book, One Coffee, where today we explore a transformative read that promises to reshape how you think about productivity and focus. The One Thing by Gary Keller. The fact that you're here, choosing to spend your time with this book, speaks volumes. In a world full of distractions, where it's all too easy to scroll endlessly through social media or get lost in hours of streaming, you've chosen to invest in something that will genuinely contribute to your growth and success. And that's not something everyone does. The One Thing stands out as an extraordinary guide that cuts through the noise and hones in on the core of what truly matters. It's about finding that singular focus that can drive extraordinary results. This book has earned high praise from influential figures across various industries. Among its notable endorsements, Tim Ferriss, the best-selling author and entrepreneur, highlights it as essential reading for anyone looking to improve their life and work. Gary Keller, the author, is a highly successful real estate entrepreneur and co-founder of Keller Williams Realty, one of the largest real estate companies in the world. His journey to writing this book comes from his personal struggle with overwhelm and the realization that success comes from narrowing focus and letting go of distractions. Now, a quick note before we dive in. This is a detailed chapter-by-chapter walkthrough, so it's going to be a longer session. Take your time with it. There's no rush. If you need to step away, save this video to your watch later or forward the link to yourself on WhatsApp so you can pick up right where you left off. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's walk through this book together, chapter by chapter, idea by idea. Let's begin. Picture this. You're sitting at your kitchen table, overwhelmed by a never-ending to-do list that seems to multiply every time you cross something off. Sound familiar? We've all been there, haven't we? That feeling of being busy all day yet somehow accomplishing nothing meaningful. Well, my friend, Gary Keller has a revelation that's about to change everything you think you know about productivity and success. You see, Keller discovered something extraordinary through years of building one of the largest real estate companies in the world. He realized that behind every extraordinary success story, behind every breakthrough moment, behind every life-changing achievement, there's always one thing. Not 10 things, not a perfectly balanced approach to everything, but literally one thing that makes all the difference. Now, think about this for a moment. We live in a world that celebrates multitasking like it's some kind of superpower. We wear our busyness like a badge of honor, juggling dozens of priorities simultaneously, convinced that doing more automatically means achieving more. But what if I told you that this entire approach is not just wrong, but actually sabotaging your success? Keller introduces us to what he calls the focusing question, and it's deceptively simple yet profoundly powerful. Here it is. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Let that sink in for a second. This isn't just another productivity hack or time management technique. This is a completely different way of thinking about how extraordinary results actually happen. The beauty of this question lies in its ability to cut through all the noise and chaos of modern life. Think about the most successful people you know, or better yet, consider the giants of history. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was drowning in dozens of products and going nowhere fast. What did he do? He didn't try to improve everything simultaneously. Instead, he asked the focusing question and ruthlessly eliminated everything except the few products that truly mattered. The result? Apple became the most valuable company in the world. But here's where it gets really interesting. Keller explains that this principle works at every level of your life, not just in business. Whether you're trying to improve your health, strengthen your relationships, advance your career, or learn a new skill, there's always one thing that, if you focus on it completely, will make everything else easier or unnecessary. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this concept. Imagine you're trying to get in better shape. Most people approach this by creating an elaborate plan involving a new diet, a gym membership, supplements, workout apps, meal prep containers, and a complete lifestyle overhaul. They try to change everything at once and wonder why they burn out within a few weeks. But what if you applied the focusing question instead? What's the one thing you could do that would make everything else about getting healthy easier or unnecessary? For many people, that one thing might be simply going to bed 30 minutes earlier. Think about it. Better sleep leads to better decision-making, which leads to better food choices, more energy for exercise, improved mood, and greater willpower throughout the day. By focusing on that one thing, everything else about getting healthy becomes easier. This is the power of what Keller calls going small. While everyone else is trying to boil the ocean, you're identifying the single domino that, when pushed, causes all the others to fall in sequence. It's like finding the loose thread that, when pulled, unravels the entire sweater. Now you might be thinking, this sounds too simple. Surely success requires more complexity than just focusing on one thing. And that's exactly the trap that keeps most people stuck in mediocrity. We've been conditioned to believe that if something isn't complicated, it can't be effective. But consider this. The most powerful forces in nature are often the simplest. Gravity is just objects attracting other objects, yet it holds the entire universe together. The focusing question works because it forces you to think about leverage and sequence. Instead of spreading your energy across multiple priorities like peanut butter on toast, you're concentrating all your power on the one thing that will create the biggest impact. It's the difference between using a flashlight and using a laser. Both emit light, but only one can cut through steel. As we wrap up this exploration of the focusing question, I want you to consider how this applies to your life right now. What's the one thing you could focus on today that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? Don't overthink it. Don't create a committee to analyze all the possibilities. Just ask the question and trust your instincts. The journey to extraordinary results begins with a single question, and now you have it. In our next conversation, we'll explore how to actually implement this focusing question in practical ways, because knowing the right question is just the beginning of the transformation. Picture this. You're sitting in a quiet room and someone places a single domino upright on a table. Looks pretty insignificant, doesn't it? But here's where Gary Keller blows our minds with something that seems almost magical. That one small domino, when it falls, can actually knock down another domino that's 50% larger than itself. And that larger domino can knock down one that's 50% larger than it. Keep this chain going, and by the time you reach the 23rd domino, you'd have a piece that's as tall as the Eiffel Tower. By the 57th domino, you'd reach the moon. Now, think about this for a moment. We're talking about starting with something you could fit in your palm and ending up with something that could literally reach our nearest celestial neighbor. This isn't just a fun physics experiment. This is the secret to how extraordinary success actually works in real life. Keller calls this the domino effect, and it's probably one of the most underestimated forces in human achievement. See, most of us have been conditioned to think that big results require big actions. We believe we need to make massive changes, implement sweeping reforms, or take giant leaps to get anywhere meaningful. But what if I told you that's exactly backwards? What if the real secret to achieving something remarkable is to focus on something so small, so seemingly insignificant, that most people would dismiss it entirely? Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this principle. Back in the early 2000s, there was a guy named Josh Waitzkin who became a chess prodigy and later a martial arts champion. His approach wasn't to master everything at once or to overwhelm himself with complex strategies. Instead, he focused obsessively on perfecting tiny, fundamental movements. In chess, he'd spend hours understanding the subtle dynamics of a single pawn move. In martial arts, he'd practice the same basic technique thousands of times until it became second nature. These small, focused actions created a domino effect that led to world-class expertise in not just one, but two completely different fields. Here's what's fascinating about the domino effect in our modern world. We live in an age of infinite distractions, where everyone's trying to do everything at once. Social media feeds us a constant stream of people who seem to be crushing it in multiple areas simultaneously. But what we don't see behind those highlight reels is the boring, repetitive, almost mundane focus on one small thing that started their entire success chain. Consider how Jeff Bezos built Amazon. He didn't start by trying to become the everything store. He focused on one thing, selling books online better than anyone else. That was his first domino. But once that domino fell and he mastered online book sales, it knocked over the next domino, expanding to other products. That domino knocked over the next one, building incredible logistics capabilities. And that domino led to cloud computing services, which led to Alexa, which led to space exploration. Each success built upon the previous one, creating an unstoppable momentum. But here's where most people get tripped up. They see the current size of Amazon and think Bezos must have had some grand master plan from day one. They miss the fundamental truth that he started by focusing obsessively on just selling books really, really well. The domino effect only works when you're willing to make that first small push with complete dedication. Now think about your own life for a moment. What's the one small thing you could focus on today that, if you did it consistently, would start your own domino effect? Maybe it's reading for just 15 minutes every morning. Maybe it's making one sales call per day. Maybe it's writing one paragraph of that book you've been thinking about. The key isn't the size of the action, it's the consistency and the connection to what comes next. Keller emphasizes something crucial here that we often forget in our instant gratification culture. The domino effect requires patience. You don't see the Eiffel Tower-sized results after pushing over the first few dominoes. In fact, for quite a while, the changes seem almost imperceptible. This is where most people give up. They push over a few small dominoes, don't see immediate dramatic results, and conclude the approach doesn't work. But the people who understand the domino effect know that the magic happens in the compound effect over time. Think about learning a new language. The first day you practice, you might learn 5 words. That's your first domino. It doesn't feel like much, but it knocks over the next domino, maybe understanding your first simple sentence. That knocks over the next domino, having your first basic conversation. Before you know it, you're thinking in that language, dreaming in it, and opening up entirely new worlds of opportunity and connection. The beauty of the domino effect is that it transforms the overwhelming into the achievable. Instead of asking yourself how you're going to write a best-selling novel, you ask what's the one paragraph you can write today. Instead of wondering how you'll ever get in the best shape of your life, you focus on what's the one healthy choice you can make right now. The domino effect takes the pressure off having to figure out the entire path and puts all your energy into identifying and pushing that next small domino. And that, my friend, is how ordinary people create extraordinary results. Picture this. You're sitting in your favorite coffee shop, watching the world go by, when you notice something fascinating. That person at the corner table who seems to effortlessly juggle a thriving business while maintaining incredible relationships. The barista who turned a simple coffee job into launching her own successful roastery. What do they know that others don't? Here's the beautiful truth that Gary Keller reveals in The One Thing. Success isn't some mysterious force that randomly strikes a lucky few. Success leaves clues, and once you learn to spot them, everything changes. Think about the most successful people you know personally, or those you've read about. Steve Jobs didn't accidentally create Apple by trying to do everything at once. Warren Buffett didn't become one of the world's greatest investors by diversifying his attention across 1,000 different strategies. Amazon's Jeff Bezos didn't build an empire by chasing every shiny opportunity that crossed his desk. What did they all have in common? They discovered their one thing and pursued it with laser-like focus. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Most of us have been taught to believe that success requires us to be well-rounded, to multitask, to keep all our options open. We've been sold this myth that successful people are just naturally gifted at juggling multiple priorities. But when you actually study the patterns of extraordinary achievement, you discover something completely different. The most successful people are actually the most focused people. They've learned the art of going narrow and deep rather than wide and shallow. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this principle. There was once a young comedian who was struggling to make it in the brutal world of stand-up comedy. Night after night, he'd perform at small clubs, often to audiences that were more interested in their drinks than his jokes. Many of his peers were trying to break into acting, writing, producing, and hosting all at the same time. They were hedging their bets, keeping multiple irons in the fire. But this particular comedian made a different choice. He decided that his one thing was becoming the best stand-up comedian he could possibly be. He studied the craft obsessively, wrote jokes constantly, and performed anywhere that would have him. That comedian was Jerry Seinfeld, and his focused approach eventually led to one of the most successful television shows in history. The clue that Seinfeld discovered, and that all successful people eventually learn, is this: extraordinary results happen when you go all in on the right activity. But here's the catch that trips up most people. Going all in doesn't mean working harder on everything. It means working smarter by identifying the one activity that will make the biggest difference, and then organizing your entire life around that priority. Think about this for a moment. In your own life, what's the one activity that, if you did it consistently and well, would transform everything else? Maybe it's writing that book you've been putting off. Perhaps it's having those difficult conversations that could revolutionize your relationships. It could be learning that skill that would skyrocket your career. The clue is usually hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to pay attention. But here's where success leaves another crucial clue that most people miss entirely. The path to extraordinary results isn't just about identifying your one thing, it's about protecting it fiercely. Successful people have learned to say no to good opportunities so they can say yes to great ones. They understand that every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that matters. Consider how this applies to our modern world of infinite distractions. Your smartphone buzzes with notifications every few minutes. Your email inbox fills up faster than you can empty it. Social media platforms are literally designed to fragment your attention. In this environment, the ability to focus on your one thing isn't just helpful, it's absolutely essential for survival, let alone success. The most successful entrepreneurs today aren't the ones trying to chase every trend or opportunity. They're the ones who have identified their core mission and stick to it religiously. Take someone like Elon Musk, who might seem like he's involved in everything from electric cars to space travel. But look closer, and you'll see that all his ventures connect to a single, focused vision, making life multiplanetary and sustainable. That's his one thing, and everything else serves that larger purpose. Here's perhaps the most encouraging clue that success leaves. You don't need to be the most talented person in the room to achieve extraordinary results. You just need to be the most focused. When you consistently direct your energy toward your one thing, compound interest begins working in your favor. Small, focused efforts accumulate into massive results over time. So as you sit with your coffee today, ask yourself this crucial question. What's the one thing you could do that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? The answer to that question is your roadmap to extraordinary results. Success has been leaving you clues all along. Now it's time to start following them. Picture this. You're sitting in a coffee shop, watching people rush by the window, each person seemingly busy with something urgent, something important. But here's the fascinating thing Gary Keller wants us to understand about purpose. Most of those people rushing by aren't actually moving toward anything meaningful. They're just moving. And there's a profound difference between being busy and being purposeful that can transform everything about how we approach our goals and our lives. Think about the last time someone asked you what your purpose was. Did you fumble for words? Maybe you gave some vague answer about being happy or successful. Keller argues that this vagueness isn't just unhelpful, it's actually dangerous. When we don't have a clear sense of purpose, we end up like that person in the grocery store wandering the aisles without a list, picking up random items and somehow still leaving without the one thing we actually needed. Now, here's where Keller gets really interesting. He tells us that purpose isn't something mystical that descends from the heavens in a moment of enlightenment. Purpose is actually something we can discover through a simple but powerful process of elimination. He suggests we start by asking ourselves what we don't want, because often it's easier to identify what we're moving away from than what we're moving toward. Don't want to feel stressed all the time. Don't want to work in a job that drains your soul. Don't want relationships that feel superficial. These don't wants actually point us toward our purpose like a compass needle finding true north. But here's the twist that makes Keller's approach so practical. He believes our purpose should be big enough to matter but specific enough to act on. Think about this. If your purpose is something generic like make the world a better place, how do you know what to do when you wake up tomorrow morning? But if your purpose is something like help small business owners build systems that give them their evenings back, suddenly you have a clear direction for your energy and attention. Keller shares a story about a real estate agent who was struggling despite working incredibly long hours. This agent was doing everything: hosting open houses, cold calling, managing social media, handling paperwork, networking at every possible event. Sound familiar? The agent was busy from dawn to dusk, but wasn't getting anywhere meaningful. Then something shifted when this agent got crystal clear about their purpose: to help families find homes where their children could grow up safely and happily. With that clarity, everything changed. The agent stopped chasing every possible lead and started focusing specifically on family-oriented neighborhoods and properties. The result? Not only did their income double, but they actually worked fewer hours because every action was aligned with their deeper purpose. Now, think about your own life for a moment. How many of your daily activities actually connect to something you genuinely care about? Keller suggests that most of us are living what he calls accidental lives, lives that happen to us rather than lives we consciously create. We get caught up in responding to emails, attending meetings, checking off tasks, but we never step back to ask whether any of this is moving us toward what truly matters to us. Here's where the alignment piece becomes crucial. Keller argues that when our goals align with our purpose, something almost magical happens. Work stops feeling like work. The energy we used to spend forcing ourselves to do things we didn't really care about gets redirected toward activities that naturally energize us. It's like the difference between swimming upstream against a powerful current and suddenly turning around to swim with that same current carrying you forward. But let's be honest, this alignment doesn't happen overnight. Keller acknowledges that most of us have built lives that are somewhat misaligned with our true purpose, and course-correcting requires both courage and patience. He uses the metaphor of a massive cargo ship changing direction. The captain doesn't just spin the wheel and expect an immediate 90-degree turn. Instead, they make gradual adjustments, and over time, the ship's entire trajectory shifts toward the new destination. The beautiful thing about living with purpose, according to Keller, is that it simplifies decision-making in ways that feel almost effortless. When someone offers you an opportunity, you don't need to agonize over whether to say yes or no. You simply ask, does this move me closer to my purpose or further away? When you're deciding how to spend your evening, the choice becomes clear. What would serve my larger purpose better? Scrolling through social media or investing time in that skill I've been wanting to develop? As we move forward in our exploration of the one thing, remember that purpose isn't a luxury for people who have their lives figured out. It's actually the foundation that helps us figure our lives out. When we know why we're here and what we're trying to accomplish, the question of what to do next becomes much clearer, and that clarity is where real progress begins. Picture this. You're sitting at your desk on a Monday morning, staring at a to-do list that looks like it could wrap around your entire office building. Sound familiar? We've all been there, haven't we? That overwhelming feeling when everything seems urgent, everything seems important, and you're paralyzed by the sheer volume of choices in front of you. Well, grab that coffee a little tighter, because Gary Keller is about to fundamentally change how you think about getting things done. Here's the thing that most of us get completely wrong about productivity. We treat all tasks like they're created equal, like each item on our list deserves the same attention and energy. But Keller drops this truth bomb that changes everything. Not all priorities are actually priorities. In fact, he argues that the word priorities itself is misleading because, by definition, a priority should be singular. You can't have multiple top priorities any more than you can have multiple bests or multiple firsts. Think about that for a moment. When everything is a priority, nothing actually is. Keller tells this fascinating story about a time management consultant who was working with a steel company executive back in the early 1900s. The consultant gave the executive this incredibly simple piece of advice. Write down the 6 most important things you need to accomplish tomorrow, then number them in order of importance. Start with number 1, and don't move to number 2 until number 1 is completely finished. The executive was skeptical at first, thinking this was too simple to be effective. But after trying it for a few weeks, he was so impressed with the results that he sent the consultant a check for $25,000, which in today's money would be worth hundreds of thousands. Why? Because this simple system of prioritization transformed not just his productivity, but his entire company's performance. Now, think about this in the context of our modern world. We're bombarded with notifications, emails, Slack messages, social media updates, and a constant stream of what feels like urgent demands on our attention. The average knowledge worker checks email every 6 minutes. 6 minutes. We've created this culture where being busy has become a badge of honor, where multitasking is seen as a superpower, when in reality, it's killing our ability to focus on what truly matters. Keller introduces this concept he calls time blocking, and it's like having a superpower for your calendar. Instead of just scheduling meetings and appointments, you actually block out time for your most important work. He shares the story of how he transformed his own real estate business by blocking out 4 hours every morning for his one thing, the most important activity that would drive his business forward. During those 4 hours, his phone was off, his door was closed, and his team knew not to interrupt him unless the building was literally on fire. But here's where it gets really interesting. Living by priority isn't just about managing your time better, it's about managing your energy and attention. Keller explains that our willpower is like a muscle that gets tired throughout the day. This is why so many people start their day with great intentions but find themselves scrolling through social media or organizing their desk drawer by afternoon. The science is clear. We have the most mental energy and decision-making power in the morning, which is exactly when we should be tackling our most important work. Picture your attention like a laser beam versus a flashlight. A flashlight spreads its light over a wide area but doesn't have much intensity. A laser focuses all its energy into a concentrated beam that can cut through steel. That's the difference between scattered attention and focused priority. When you try to focus on everything, you're operating like a flashlight. When you identify your one thing and give it your full attention, you become a laser. Keller also addresses something that resonates deeply in our achievement-obsessed culture, the fear of saying no. He points out that every yes to one thing is automatically a no to something else. When you say yes to checking email first thing in the morning, you're saying no to working on your most important project when your mind is fresh. When you say yes to that meeting that could have been an email, you're saying no to deep, focused work time. The most successful people aren't just good at identifying what to do, they're exceptional at identifying what not to do. Think about the most successful people you know, whether they're entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, or leaders in any field. What do they all have in common? They've figured out their one thing, and they've built their entire day, their entire life, around protecting and prioritizing that one thing. They understand that extraordinary results come from extraordinary focus, not extraordinary effort spread thin across a dozen different activities. As we dive deeper into these concepts, Remember that mastering the art of prioritization isn't about doing more things. It's about doing the right things with the intensity and focus they deserve. It's about making peace with the fact that you can't do everything, but you can do the one thing that matters most exceptionally well. Picture this. You're sitting at your desk, surrounded by a mountain of tasks, your phone buzzing with notifications, and your brain feeling like it's running a marathon in quicksand. Sound familiar? We've all been there, haven't we? That overwhelming feeling that we're busy all day but somehow not getting anywhere meaningful. Well, my friend, grab your coffee a little tighter because we're about to dive into what Gary Keller calls living for productivity. And trust me, this isn't about cramming more into your already packed schedule. Here's the thing that'll blow your mind. Productivity isn't about doing more things. I know, it sounds counterintuitive, especially in our hustle culture where being busy has become a badge of honor. But Keller flips this entire notion on its head. True productivity is about doing the right thing, not doing everything right. Think about it this way. Imagine you're a lumberjack with the sharpest axe in the forest. You could spend your entire day chopping down saplings, feeling incredibly busy and accomplished, or you could focus that same energy on felling one massive oak tree that's worth more than 50 saplings combined. Which approach actually moves the needle? This is where Keller introduces us to the concept of living purposefully for productivity. It's not about time management anymore, it's about priority management. Now, think about this for a moment. How many times have you ended a day feeling exhausted but somehow unfulfilled? You crossed off 20 items from your to-do list, but deep down, you know you didn't really advance toward anything meaningful. That's because you were playing checkers when you should have been playing chess. The magic happens when you start asking yourself what Keller calls the focusing question. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? This isn't just some motivational poster wisdom. This question is like a GPS for your productivity. It cuts through the noise and points you directly toward what matters most. Let me paint you a picture here. Imagine you're trying to lose weight. You could spend hours researching supplements, buying fancy workout gear, downloading 17 different fitness apps, and reading every diet book known to humanity. Or you could ask the focusing question and realize that if you just started walking 30 minutes every day, everything else about your health journey would become easier or unnecessary. The walking habit would naturally lead to better food choices, improved sleep, and increased motivation for other healthy behaviors. But here's where it gets really interesting. Keller argues that most of us are living in what he calls the lies of productivity. We've been conditioned to believe that multitasking makes us efficient, that bigger is always better, and that we need to maintain perfect balance in all areas of our lives. These beliefs are productivity killers disguised as productivity boosters. It's like trying to drive with the parking brake on. You're moving, but you're working against yourself. Consider the modern workplace for a second. We've created these elaborate systems of meetings about meetings, status updates on status updates, and processes to manage our processes. We've become so focused on looking productive that we've forgotten what actual productivity feels like. Real productivity has a rhythm to it, a flow that comes from sustained focus on what truly matters. It's the difference between a jazz musician noodling around with random notes and playing a beautiful, purposeful melody. Keller shares a powerful story about a successful business owner who was drowning in his own success. This entrepreneur was working 18-hour days, managing dozens of projects, and feeling like he was constantly behind. Sound like anyone you know, maybe yourself. The breakthrough came when he applied the one-thing principle to his business. Instead of trying to excel at everything, he identified the single most important activity that drove his business forward, building relationships with key clients. When he started dedicating his prime energy and time to this one thing, everything else in his business either improved automatically or revealed itself as unnecessary busy work. This brings us to a crucial insight about energy management. Your willpower isn't infinite, It's more like a smartphone battery that depletes throughout the day. If you're using that precious energy on trivial decisions and scattered focus, you'll have nothing left when it's time to tackle what really matters. But when you channel that energy into your one thing, you create what Keller calls a domino effect, where one focused action topples a series of larger and larger results. Now, think about this in your own life. What would happen if you identified your one thing and protected it fiercely? What if you treated your most important work like a sacred appointment that nothing could interrupt? The beauty of living for productivity this way is that it's not about sacrifice, it's about clarity. You're not giving up everything else forever. You're simply choosing to pursue everything else after you've honored your one thing. As we wrap up this exploration of productivity, remember that this approach isn't just about getting more done. It's about becoming the person who naturally focuses on what matters most, creating a life where your actions align with your deepest priorities. You know how we've been talking about finding that one thing that can transform everything in your life? Well, here's where Gary Keller gets really practical about it. Because knowing what your one thing is, that's just the beginning. The real magic happens when you make 3 crucial commitments that separate the dreamers from the achievers. Picture this. You're at a coffee shop, watching people rush by with their endless to-do lists, constantly checking their phones, looking perpetually overwhelmed. Meanwhile, there's that one person sitting calmly in the corner, completely focused on their laptop, seemingly unbothered by the chaos around them. What's the difference? They've made these 3 commitments that Keller talks about, and it shows. The first commitment is what Keller calls following the path of mastery. Now, think about this for a moment. In our instant gratification world, we've been conditioned to expect quick results. We want the six-pack abs in 30 days, the million-dollar business in 6 months, the perfect relationship by next Tuesday. But here's what Keller discovered by studying extraordinarily successful people. They all embrace the long, winding path of getting really, really good at their one thing. Take Warren Buffett, for instance. He didn't become the Oracle of Omaha overnight. He committed to mastering the art of value investing, spending decades reading annual reports, studying companies, and refining his approach. While others were jumping from one hot stock tip to another, Buffett was going deeper, getting better, becoming a master. And here's the beautiful thing about mastery: it compounds. Every day you get a little better, and those small improvements stack on top of each other like interest in a savings account. But mastery isn't just about putting in time, it's about purposeful practice. Keller shares the story of how violinists at the Berlin Academy of Music were studied, and the researchers found something fascinating. The difference between the good violinists and the great ones wasn't talent or even total practice time. It was the amount of deliberate, focused practice they engaged in. The extraordinary violinists averaged about 3.5 hours of intense, purposeful practice daily, while the good ones averaged just over an hour. Now here's where it gets interesting for us regular folks. You don't need to practice violin for hours to apply this principle. Whether you're trying to master sales, writing, parenting, or even something as simple as cooking, the question becomes, are you just going through the motions, or are you deliberately trying to improve? Are you seeking feedback, pushing your boundaries, getting uncomfortable? Because that's where growth happens. The second commitment flows naturally from the first. Moving from E to P, that's entrepreneur to purposeful. Keller argues that we all start as entrepreneurs of our own lives, but most of us get stuck there, constantly starting new projects, chasing shiny objects, spreading ourselves thin. The successful ones transition to being purposeful. They stop asking, "What can I do?" and start asking, "What should I do?" Think about Steve Jobs when he returned to Apple in 1997. The company was making dozens of products, and they were all mediocre. Jobs didn't try to fix everything. Instead, he made a purposeful decision to focus on just a few products and make them insanely great. He killed over 70 projects and focused the entire company's energy on what would become the iMac, then later the iPod, iPhone, and iPad. That's the power of moving from entrepreneurial chaos to purposeful focus. But here's what's really profound about this transition. It requires saying no to good opportunities so you can say yes to great ones. And that's hard, really hard, because good opportunities are seductive. They feel productive. They give us that busy feeling that we often mistake for progress. But purposeful people have learned to distinguish between motion and direction. The third commitment might be the most challenging, living the accountability cycle. Keller breaks this down into a simple but powerful cycle. You take ownership, you measure what matters, and you course-correct when necessary. Then you repeat. Sounds simple, right? But most people get stuck at the first step, taking ownership. Here's what Keller observed about extraordinary achievers. They have an almost supernatural ability to take responsibility for their results, even when external factors play a role. They don't blame the economy, their boss, their circumstances, or bad luck. They ask themselves, what could I have done differently? This isn't about self-flagellation, it's about power. Because when you take ownership, you reclaim the power to change things. The measuring part is where most people go wrong. They measure everything except what actually moves the needle. Keller suggests identifying the one metric that, if improved, would make everything else easier or unnecessary. For a salesperson, it might be qualified leads generated. For a writer, it might be words written daily. For a parent, it might be quality time spent with each child. These three commitments work together like gears in a well-oiled machine. Mastery gives you the skills, purpose gives you the direction, and accountability keeps you on track. When you commit to all three, something remarkable happens. You stop being at the mercy of circumstances and start creating them. You become the person who others look at and wonder, how do they make it look so easy? And that's when you know you're living your one thing. Picture this. You've finally decided to focus on your one thing, you've cleared your schedule, you're ready to make real progress, and then life happens. Your phone buzzes with a notification, your colleague drops by with an urgent question, you remember 3 other things you absolutely must do today, and suddenly your laser focus has scattered like leaves in the wind. Sound familiar? Well, my friend, you've just met what Gary Keller calls the 4 thieves. Those sneaky productivity bandits that rob us of our ability to focus on what truly matters. Now think about this for a moment. Even when we know what our one thing is, even when we're genuinely committed to it, something always seems to derail us. It's like having a beautifully planned route to your destination, only to find that there are highway robbers waiting at every turn. Keller identifies these thieves with the precision of a detective, and once you recognize them, you'll see them everywhere in your daily life. The first thief is the inability to say no. This might sound simple, but it's actually the most sophisticated of all the thieves because it disguises itself as opportunity, kindness, or even necessity. Every yes you give to something that isn't your one thing is automatically a no to what matters most. Imagine your attention as a pie, and yes, I know everyone talks about pie charts, but stay with me here. Every slice you give away to less important activities means there's less pie for what could truly change your life. The billionaire Warren Buffett once said that the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. That's not because they're antisocial or selfish. It's because they understand that their success depends on protecting their most valuable resource, their focused attention. But here's where it gets tricky in our modern world. We're constantly bombarded with what feels like urgent requests. Your boss needs that report by tomorrow. Your friend needs help moving this weekend. Your child's school needs volunteers for the bake sale. Each request feels important in the moment, and saying no feels almost cruel. But Keller reminds us that when we don't say no to the small things, we're essentially saying no to the big things by default. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a giant hole in the bottom. No matter how much water you pour in, you'll never fill it up. The second thief is fear of chaos. This one hits close to home for anyone who's ever felt overwhelmed by the thought of focusing on just one thing while everything else in their life seemingly falls apart. When you commit to your one thing, Other areas of your life won't receive the same level of attention, and that's exactly as it should be. But our brains, wired for survival and control, start sending us panic signals. What if something important gets missed? What if people think you're irresponsible? What if the dishes pile up while you're working on your novel? Here's the liberating truth that Keller shares. Chaos is not only acceptable when you're pursuing your one thing, it's actually necessary. Think of it like this. If you're a gardener trying to grow prize-winning tomatoes, you might let the lawn get a little overgrown while you focus intensely on those tomato plants. The lawn isn't dying, it's just not your priority right now. The same principle applies to life. Some things can be temporarily neglected, delegated, or simply accepted as good enough, while you pour your energy into what matters most. The third thief is poor health habits, and this one is particularly insidious because it operates slowly, like a leak in your roof that you don't notice until there's water damage throughout your house. When we neglect our physical and mental well-being in pursuit of productivity, we're essentially borrowing against our future selves. Keller emphasizes that energy management is just as important as time management. You might have all the time in the world to work on your one thing, but if you're running on 3 hours of sleep and surviving on coffee and stress, your ability to do meaningful work plummets dramatically. Consider this. Would you rather have 10 hours of scattered, low-energy work or 4 hours of sharp, focused, high-quality effort? The math is simple, but the application requires discipline. This means treating sleep, exercise, and proper nutrition not as luxuries or afterthoughts, but as essential infrastructure for your success. The fourth and final thief is an environment that doesn't support your goals. Your environment is constantly shaping your behavior, often in ways you don't even realize. If your workspace is cluttered and chaotic, your thinking becomes cluttered and chaotic. If your phone is always within arm's reach, buzzing with notifications, your attention will be constantly fragmented. If you're surrounded by people who don't understand or support your one thing, you'll find yourself constantly having to defend your choices instead of simply executing them. The beautiful thing about understanding these four thieves is that once you can name them, you can tame them. Recognition is the first step toward freedom, and now that you know what's been robbing you of your focus, you can start building the defenses you need to protect what matters most. You know, we've been talking about focus, about asking the right questions, about creating systems that support our one thing. But here's where the rubber meets the road, my friend. Here's where all that beautiful theory either transforms your life or becomes just another set of good intentions gathering dust on your mental shelf. Gary Keller calls this living with accountability, and honestly, this might be the most uncomfortable chapter in the entire book, because it forces us to look in the mirror and ask ourselves the hardest question of all. Are we actually doing what we say we want to do? Picture this scene for a moment. You're sitting across from your best friend at your favorite coffee shop, and they ask you how that big goal is going. You know, the one you were so excited about 3 months ago, the one that was going to change everything. Now, think about this honestly. What's your gut reaction? Do you feel a surge of pride because you've been consistently showing up? Or do you feel that familiar knot in your stomach that comes with knowing you've been making excuses? Keller argues that accountability is the bridge between good intentions and actual results, and he's absolutely right. Without accountability, our dreams remain just that, dreams floating in the comfortable space of someday. But here's what makes this concept so powerful and so challenging at the same time. True accountability isn't about beating yourself up when you fall short. It's about creating an honest relationship with reality. Think about the most successful people you know personally, not the celebrities or business moguls you read about, but the people in your actual life who consistently achieve what they set out to do. I'll bet they have one thing in common. They don't lie to themselves about their progress. They don't dress up their excuses in fancy language or blame their circumstances for their lack of results. They look at what happened, they own it completely, and they adjust their approach accordingly. Now, here's where this gets really interesting. Keller introduces this idea of accountability partnerships, and at first glance, it might seem like just another productivity hack. But dig deeper, and you'll realize he's talking about something much more profound. He's talking about the courage to be vulnerable with another human being about your struggles and your commitments. Imagine having someone in your life who knows your one thing as well as you do, someone who cares enough about your success to ask the tough questions. Not in a judgmental way, but in a loving, supportive way that says, "I believe in you too much to let you settle for less than your potential." This isn't about having someone police your behavior. It's about having a witness to your journey, someone who can see your patterns more clearly than you can because they're not caught up in your internal justifications. But here's the thing that Keller emphasizes, and it's crucial. You can't outsource your accountability entirely to another person. External accountability is powerful, yes, but it only works when it's built on a foundation of personal responsibility. You have to be the kind of person who tells the truth about your actions, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Let me share something that really struck me about this chapter. Keller talks about the difference between being accountable for your actions versus being accountable for your results. Most of us get this backwards. We focus so much on controlling outcomes that we forget to pay attention to the daily actions that create those outcomes. But here's the paradox. When you become truly accountable for your actions, the results tend to take care of themselves. Think about this in terms of your own life. Maybe your one thing is writing a book. You can't control whether it becomes a bestseller, you can't control the reviews, you can't even control whether a publisher will want it. But you absolutely can control whether you show up at your desk every morning. You can control whether you write your daily word count. You can control whether you're honest about the days you skip and why you skip them. This kind of accountability requires what Keller calls radical honesty with yourself. It means tracking not just what you did, but how you felt when you did it, what obstacles you encountered, and how you responded to those obstacles. It means celebrating your wins without inflating them and acknowledging your setbacks without catastrophizing them. Now, as we wrap up this exploration of accountability, I want you to consider this. Living with accountability isn't about perfection. It's about integrity. It's about aligning your actions with your stated values and commitments. It's about becoming the kind of person who can be trusted, first and foremost by yourself, to follow through on what matters most. In our next conversation, we'll explore how all these principles come together in the final piece of Keller's framework. But for now, sit with this question. What would change in your life if you approached your one thing with complete, unflinching accountability? You know that feeling when you're sitting in front of your computer, staring at your to-do list that seems to multiply like rabbits, wondering where on earth to even begin? We've all been there. You've got 17 different priorities screaming for attention, your phone buzzing with notifications, and that nagging voice in your head asking, "What should I be doing right now?" Well, Gary Keller has a beautifully simple answer to that chaos, and it comes in the form of what he calls the focusing question. Picture this. Instead of drowning in an ocean of possibilities, what if you had a single, powerful question that could cut through all the noise and point you directly toward what matters most? That's exactly what Keller discovered after years of building one of the largest real estate companies in the world. He found that extraordinary results don't come from doing everything, they come from doing the right thing. The focusing question is deceptively simple, yet profoundly transformative. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Now, think about this for a moment. How often do we ask ourselves questions that actually lead somewhere productive? Most of the time, we're asking ourselves things like, what do I need to do today? Or how am I going to get all this done? These questions, while natural, actually work against us because they assume we need to do everything on our list. But here's where Keller's insight gets really interesting. He tells the story of a successful entrepreneur who was struggling to grow his business despite working 18-hour days. The man had a massive action plan with dozens of initiatives, marketing campaigns, and operational improvements. Sound familiar? When Keller introduced him to the focusing question, everything changed. Instead of asking, "How do I grow my business?" he started asking, "What's the one thing I can do to grow my business such that by doing it everything else will be easier or unnecessary?" The answer surprised him. Hire and train a world-class sales manager. That single decision transformed his entire company because it created a domino effect that improved every other aspect of his business. This is the magic of the right question. It doesn't just give you an answer, it gives you the answer that makes other answers unnecessary. Think of it like finding the keystone in an arch. Remove any other stone and the arch still stands, but remove the keystone and everything collapses. Conversely, when you place the right keystone, everything else falls into perfect alignment. Now you might be wondering, but what about all the other important things I need to do? Here's what's fascinating about human psychology. We're wired to believe that more is better, that busy equals productive, that having our hands in every pot means we're being responsible. But Keller challenges this assumption with real data from the business world. He points to companies like Apple, which became the most valuable company in the world not by making every possible product, but by obsessively focusing on a few products and making them extraordinary. The focusing question works because it forces you to think in terms of priority, not plurality. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was making dozens of computer models and was nearly bankrupt. His first move, he asked the focusing question, "What's the one thing we can do such that by doing it everything else will be easier or unnecessary?" The answer led him to eliminate most of Apple's product line and focus on just 4 products. That decision didn't just save Apple, it launched them into becoming one of the most innovative companies in history. But let's bring this down to your daily life, because that's where the rubber really meets the road. Imagine you're a working parent trying to balance career advancement, family time, health, and personal growth. Instead of frantically juggling all these balls and feeling like you're failing at everything, the focusing question helps you identify which ball, when caught and thrown well, makes catching all the other balls easier. Maybe it's establishing a morning routine that gives you energy and clarity for the entire day. Maybe it's having that difficult conversation with your boss about priorities that eliminates half your stress. Maybe it's teaching your kids one organizational skill that transforms your household dynamics. The beauty of this question is that it's not asking you to abandon everything else forever. It's asking you to sequence your efforts strategically. What's the one thing that, once accomplished, creates the conditions for everything else to flow more smoothly? It's like clearing the biggest log from a logjam. Suddenly, everything else starts moving downstream naturally. As we dive deeper into how to apply the focusing question in your own life, remember that the goal isn't perfection, it's progress with purpose. The question itself becomes your compass, always pointing you toward your true north when the world tries to spin you in circles. You know how we've been talking about finding your one thing, about cutting through all the noise and distractions to focus on what truly matters. Well, here's where the rubber meets the road, my friend. Because knowing what to focus on is only half the battle. The real magic happens when you turn that focus into what Gary Keller calls the success habit. Picture this. You're sitting across from me at our favorite coffee shop, and I ask you a simple question. What's the difference between someone who occasionally eats healthy and someone who's genuinely fit? Or between someone who reads a business book once in a while and someone who's built a thriving company? The answer isn't talent, luck, or even knowledge. It's habit. It's the difference between doing something when you feel like it and doing something because it's simply who you are. Keller shares a fascinating story about Jerry Seinfeld that perfectly illustrates this principle. Now, you might think Seinfeld's success came from being naturally funny, but here's what most people don't know. Seinfeld had a simple but powerful habit. He wrote jokes every single day. Not just when inspiration struck, not just when he had a gig coming up. Every single day. He even had a big wall calendar where he'd mark an X for each day he wrote material. His only job was to not break the chain. Think about that for a moment. Here's one of the most successful comedians of all time, and his secret weapon wasn't some burst of creative genius. It was the mundane, unsexy act of showing up consistently, day after day after day. That's the success habit in action. But here's where it gets really interesting. Keller explains that most people approach habit formation completely backwards. They try to change everything at once, like some kind of life makeover montage from a movie. They'll decide to wake up earlier, exercise more, eat better, read daily, meditate, and reorganize their entire schedule all in the same week. Sound familiar? The research tells us something different, though. Studies show that it takes an average of 66 days to form a new habit, not the 21 days we often hear about. And here's the kicker. The more complex the habit, the longer it takes. So when you try to overhaul your entire life at once, you're essentially fighting a battle on multiple fronts. It's like trying to learn piano, Spanish, and rock climbing simultaneously while also training for a marathon. Your willpower gets stretched so thin that something's got to give. Instead, Keller advocates for what he calls habit stacking, but with a twist. You don't stack multiple new habits at once. You stack one new habit on top of an existing routine that's already rock solid in your life. Maybe you already brush your teeth every morning without fail. That's your anchor. Now you attach your one thing practice right after that established routine. Let me paint you a picture of how this works in the real world. Sarah, a marketing executive, identified that her one thing was developing deeper relationships with her key clients. But between meetings, emails, and the daily chaos of corporate life, this crucial activity kept getting pushed aside. So she created a simple habit. Every morning, right after she checked her calendar, she would send one meaningful message to a client. Not a generic check-in. Something personal, valuable, or thoughtful. It took maybe 5 minutes, but it was non-negotiable. Within 6 months, Sarah's client relationships had transformed. She wasn't working longer hours or attending more networking events. She was simply being consistent with one small, focused action that aligned with her one thing. That's the power of the success habit. Now you might be thinking, this sounds great, but what about when life gets crazy? And that's exactly the right question to ask, because life will get crazy. There will be days when your routine gets blown up, when emergencies arise, when you just don't feel like doing anything productive. Keller addresses this head-on with what he calls bookending your day. The idea is simple but profound. You protect your one-thing practice by scheduling it during your most predictable time of day. For most people, that's first thing in the morning, before the world starts making demands on your attention. It's like creating a sacred space in your day that belongs only to your most important work. But here's what really separates successful people from everyone else. They understand that the habit is more important than the outcome on any given day. Some days, your practice might feel effortless and inspired. Other days, it might feel like you're dragging yourself through mud. The key is showing up regardless of how you feel. As we wrap up this conversation about the success habit, remember this. Extraordinary results don't come from extraordinary effort applied occasionally. They come from ordinary effort applied consistently over time. Your one thing isn't just about what you focus on. It's about how you show up for that focus, day after day, until it becomes as natural as breathing. And that transformation from conscious effort to unconscious competence, that's where the real magic happens. Picture this. You're sitting in a coffee shop, watching people rush by the window, each one seemingly busy, each one moving with purpose. But here's the question that might stop you mid-sip. Are they really living with purpose, or are they just busy? Gary Keller tackles this profound distinction in what might be the most transformative section of The One Thing, and it's a conversation we desperately need to have in our achievement-obsessed world. You know, there's something almost magical that happens when you connect your daily actions to a deeper sense of meaning. Keller doesn't just tell us to find our purpose. He shows us how to weave it so tightly into our goals that they become practically unbreakable. Think about the last time you tried to stick to a goal. Maybe it was exercising more, learning a new skill, or building better relationships. Now, be honest, how long did that motivation last? If you're like most people, probably not very long. But here's what Keller discovered. The goals that stick, the ones that actually change our lives, are the ones anchored in something bigger than ourselves. Let me paint you a picture with one of Keller's most compelling examples. He tells the story of a real estate agent who was struggling to stay motivated. Every day felt like a grind: cold calls, paperwork, rejections. Sound familiar? This agent was technically successful, hitting targets and making decent money, but something was missing. Then she had what Keller calls her purpose breakthrough. She realized that what she was really doing wasn't selling houses. She was helping families find their sanctuary, their place of belonging. Suddenly, every phone call became an opportunity to change someone's life. Every showing became a chance to witness someone's dreams taking shape. Same job, same tasks, but completely transformed by purpose. Now, think about this for a moment. How many of us are sleepwalking through our goals because we've forgotten why they matter? Keller argues that purpose isn't just some fluffy concept reserved for philosophers and life coaches. It's the rocket fuel that propels us through the inevitable obstacles and setbacks that come with pursuing anything meaningful. When you're clear on your why, your what becomes not just easier, but almost inevitable. But here's where Keller gets really practical. He doesn't leave us floating in abstract concepts about finding our life's calling. Instead, he gives us what he calls the purpose pyramid. Imagine your life as a pyramid where every level builds on the one below it. At the foundation, you have your spiritual purpose, your deepest beliefs about why you're here. Above that sits your social purpose, how you want to contribute to your relationships and community. Then comes your personal purpose, who you want to become as an individual. And finally, at the top, your professional purpose, how your work serves the larger picture. The genius of this framework is that it shows us how our daily goals should connect to every level of our being. When Keller worked with a struggling entrepreneur who was ready to give up on his business, they didn't start by tweaking his business plan. They started by exploring his purpose pyramid. Turns out, this guy had started his company because he wanted to create flexible work opportunities for other parents like himself. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of that vision and gotten caught up in the mechanics of running a business. Once they reconnected his daily tasks to his deeper purpose of serving other families, his energy returned, his creativity exploded, and his business began to thrive. Here's what's beautiful about living with purpose. It transforms how you see obstacles. Instead of roadblocks, they become tests of how much you really want what you're pursuing. Keller shares the story of a teacher who decided her purpose was to ensure no child in her classroom fell behind. When budget cuts threatened her program, instead of giving up, she became incredibly creative, organizing community fundraisers, partnering with local businesses, even using her own resources. Why? Because when you're clear on your purpose, you find ways instead of excuses. But let's be real for a minute. In our Instagram-perfect, always hustling culture, it's easy to confuse being busy with being purposeful. Keller warns against what he calls purpose drift, that subtle way we can start going through the motions even when we once felt deeply connected to our why. The antidote: regular purpose check-ins. He suggests asking yourself monthly, is what I'm doing today moving me closer to who I want to become and the impact I want to have? The most profound insight Keller offers is this: purpose isn't something you find once and then file away. It's something you live into day by day, choice by choice. When your goals are rooted in genuine purpose, they stop being items on a to-do list and become expressions of who you are. That's when the real magic happens, when achieving your goals becomes as natural as breathing, because they're aligned with the deepest part of who you're meant to be. As we move forward in exploring how to make this one thing approach practical and sustainable, remember this foundation Keller has laid for us. Without purpose, even the most focused effort can feel hollow. But with it, every small step becomes part of something magnificent. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite coffee, and I'm about to share something that could completely transform how you think about your potential. We've been exploring Gary Keller's revolutionary approach to productivity, and now we're diving into perhaps the most liberating chapter of all, unlocking the potential that's been trapped inside you by the very limits you've accepted as truth. You know that feeling when you're driving and you suddenly realize you've been going 45 in a 70 zone, not because of traffic or road conditions, but simply because you forgot to check your speedometer. That's exactly what most of us do with our lives. We cruise along at a fraction of our capability, never questioning whether we could actually go faster, achieve more, or reach heights we've never even considered possible. Keller opens this section with a story that hits like a lightning bolt. He talks about Roger Bannister, the first person to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Now, here's what's fascinating, and this is where it gets really good. Before May 6, 1954, the 4-minute mile wasn't just considered difficult. It was believed to be humanly impossible. Doctors claimed the human heart would explode. Scientists said our lung capacity couldn't handle it. The entire athletic community had accepted this as an unbreakable barrier, but then Bannister did it. And here's the kicker. Within just 2 years, 16 other runners had also broken the 4-minute barrier. 16. What changed? Did humans suddenly evolve? Did we discover new training techniques overnight? No. What changed was belief. The limiting belief had been shattered. Now, think about this in your own life. What 4-minute miles are you carrying around? What invisible barriers have you accepted as gospel truth? Maybe you've told yourself you're not a morning person, so you'll never be able to start that side business before work. Perhaps you've decided you're not tech-savvy enough to learn that new skill that could advance your career. Or maybe, like so many of us, you've convinced yourself that extraordinary success is reserved for other people, the lucky ones, the naturally gifted ones, anyone but you. Keller argues that our potential isn't limited by our circumstances, our background, or even our current abilities. It's limited by our thinking. He shares the story of a woman named Sarah who worked in accounting and believed she was destined to crunch numbers forever. She had this limiting belief that creativity wasn't her thing. But when her company needed someone to redesign their client presentation system, she reluctantly volunteered, thinking she'd just help with the spreadsheets. 6 months later, she was leading the creative team, having discovered a talent she never knew existed because she never gave it permission to exist. Here's where Keller gets really practical, and this is pure gold for anyone listening while sipping their morning coffee and planning their day. He introduces what he calls the ceiling effect. Imagine your current performance level as the floor of a room, and your perceived limitations as the ceiling. Most people spend their entire lives rearranging furniture on that floor, never once looking up to see if the ceiling is real or just something they've constructed in their minds. But here's the beautiful part. When you focus on your one thing, when you channel all your energy into that single most important priority, you don't just bump against that ceiling, you blast right through it. It's like discovering that what you thought was a concrete barrier was actually just a paper screen. Keller shares example after example of people who thought they had reached their maximum capacity, only to discover they were operating at maybe 20% of their true potential. Think about Michael Jordan, who was cut from his high school basketball team, or Oprah Winfrey, who was told she was unfit for television news. These weren't people who settled for their apparent limitations. They used those limitations as launching pads. They focused on their one thing with such intensity that they didn't just exceed expectations, they redefined what was possible. The most powerful insight Keller offers is this: your potential isn't fixed. It's not some predetermined number stamped on your forehead at birth. It's dynamic, expandable, and directly connected to your willingness to challenge the stories you've been telling yourself about what you can and cannot achieve. Every time you push through what you thought was your limit, you don't just reach a new level, you expand your capacity to reach even higher levels. As we prepare to explore how to apply these insights practically, I want you to sit with this question. If you knew you couldn't fail, if you knew that every limitation you've accepted was just a temporary barrier waiting to be broken, what would you focus your energy on? What would become your one thing? Because here's what Keller has discovered, and what thousands of successful people have proven. The only real limits are the ones we refuse to challenge. Your potential isn't waiting to be discovered, it's waiting to be unleashed. Picture yourself sitting across from me at your favorite coffee shop, steam rising from your mug, and I'm about to share something that could completely reshape how you think about success. We've journeyed through Gary Keller's brilliant insights about focus, discipline, and the power of asking the right questions. Now we arrive at the culmination of it all: how to actually integrate these life-changing ideas into your daily reality to create extraordinary results. You know, there's something magical that happens when all the pieces of a puzzle finally click together. Keller describes this moment beautifully through the story of a domino effect that started with just one small action. Imagine a single domino, perfectly positioned, that when pushed creates a cascade powerful enough to topple dominoes 50% larger than itself. Each successive domino grows bigger, and by the time you reach the 23rd domino, you're looking at something the size of the Eiffel Tower. That's not just mathematics, that's the power of geometric progression applied to your life. Now think about this for a moment. What if your morning routine was that first domino? What if the one thing you choose to focus on today could set in motion a chain reaction that transforms your entire year? Keller argues that extraordinary results aren't about doing extraordinary things. They're about doing ordinary things extraordinarily well, with laser-like focus on what matters most. The secret lies in what Keller calls time blocking, but this isn't your typical calendar management technique. This is about treating your most important work like a sacred appointment with your future self. Imagine you're a surgeon preparing for a life-saving operation. You wouldn't allow interruptions, you wouldn't check your phone, and you certainly wouldn't multitask. That same reverence, that same protective intensity, needs to surround your one thing. Keller shares the fascinating story of a real estate agent who was struggling to break through to the next level of success. She was working harder than ever, juggling dozens of tasks, yet her income remained frustratingly flat. Everything changed when she identified her one thing: prospecting for new clients. Instead of spending her mornings answering emails and returning calls, she blocked out 4 hours every day for nothing but prospecting. The transformation was remarkable. Within 6 months, her income had tripled. But here's what's truly extraordinary about this story: she was actually working fewer hours overall. This brings us to a counterintuitive truth that Keller emphasizes throughout his work. The path to extraordinary results often requires saying no to good opportunities so you can say yes to great ones. It's like being a master chef who refuses to add 17 different spices to a dish, because they know that the perfect combination of just 3 ingredients will create something truly memorable. Consider how this applies to our modern, hyper-connected world. We're bombarded with notifications, opportunities, and urgent requests that masquerade as important work. Social media platforms are literally designed to fragment our attention, making us feel productive while keeping us from our most meaningful work. The person who achieves extraordinary results has learned to see through this illusion. They understand that being busy and being productive are not the same thing. Keller introduces us to the concept of going small, drilling down to find the one thing that, when accomplished, makes everything else easier or unnecessary. Think of it like finding the keystone in an arch. Remove any other stone and the structure remains intact. Remove the keystone and everything collapses. Your one thing is the keystone of your success. The integration of these ideas requires what Keller calls purpose, priority, and productivity working in harmony. Your purpose is your why, the deeper reason that gets you out of bed even when motivation fails. Your priority is your what, the one thing that deserves your best energy and attention. Your productivity is your how, the specific actions and habits that turn intention into reality. But here's where many people stumble. They try to change everything at once, like someone attempting to learn 5 languages simultaneously. Keller advocates for what he calls success sequencing, mastering one area of focus before moving to the next. It's the difference between a river that carves the Grand Canyon and a flood that spreads everywhere but leaves no lasting impact. The beauty of this approach becomes clear when you realize that extraordinary results compound over time. Each day you focus on your one thing, you're not just making progress, you're building momentum that makes tomorrow's progress easier and more powerful. It's like a savings account where the interest keeps growing, except instead of money, you're accumulating skill, reputation, and meaningful achievement. As we wrap up this transformative journey through Keller's insights, remember that the gap between knowing and doing is where dreams either flourish or die. The ideas we've explored together aren't just interesting concepts, they're practical tools waiting to reshape your reality. The question isn't whether these principles work, but whether you'll work them consistently enough to experience their extraordinary power in your own life. In The One Thing, Gary Keller brings forth a transformative approach to achieving extraordinary results in every area of life. The book emphasizes the power of focusing on one critical task at a time to drive success. Keller navigates through the clutter of daily life, showing how the simplicity of singular focus can yield tremendous benefits. Here are 4 key actionable takeaways from this enlightening read. 1. Focus on your one thing. Keller urges us to identify the single most important task that aligns with our goals. To apply this, start each day by asking, what is the one thing I can do today that will make everything else easier or unnecessary? Make this task your priority, protecting it from distractions and competing demands. 2. Start incredibly small. Begin with tiny steps toward your big goal. By breaking tasks into manageable pieces, you build momentum and confidence. Each small accomplishment sets the stage for the next, making it easier to tackle larger challenges over time. 3. Time block your day. Dedicate specific time slots to focus solely on your one thing. This practice ensures that you give your highest priority the attention it deserves. Schedule interruptions around these blocks, protecting your productivity. 4. Be patient with yourself. Progress often requires patience and persistence. Understand that setbacks are part of the journey. Celebrate small victories and remain committed to your path, knowing that consistency is key to achieving remarkable outcomes. By integrating these principles into our daily lives, The One Thing provides a practical roadmap to success, urging us to simplify, focus, and ultimately achieve more with less effort. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below with at least one idea from this book that stuck with you, one concept you're going to carry forward. It could be something that challenged your thinking, something you want to try, or even something you disagreed with. Your insight might be exactly what another listener needs to hear today. And if this summary gave you something valuable, a new perspective, a spark of motivation, or even just a peaceful hour with your coffee, share it with someone who might need it too. Subscribe to One Book, One Coffee, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new summary. Every week, we sit down together with one great book, one warm cup of coffee, and the simple belief that wisdom, shared well, can change lives. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and remember, every small step counts. See you at the next book.